So if you've ever spent 5 minutes on a film theory subreddit, or honestly just tried to argue with someone about a piece of media online, you've probably heard the concept of the death of the author. Now, you don't need to have read the original 1967 essay by Roland Barthes, a French guy who basically dropped a theoretical bomb on literary criticism, to understand the vibe. The short version is, the author is dead. Their intentions, their biography, their silly little tweets about using magic to wash their robes. None of that matters. Once the text is out, it's a multitude of writings, belonging entirely to the audience. It's an idea grounded more in the transactional model of communication theory than literary theory, because it recognizes that the reader brings their own life experience, their wants, their needs, their attitudes, to the table when they consume a work of art. This theoretical move, this Barthesian annihilation, is actually amazingly valuable. It's the critical backbone of the entire Aquafan movement. It lets us talk about the homosocial subtext in Top Gun or the capitalist critique in a Disney movie, even if the director was only thinking about fighter jets and making bank. And it's very important to point out that neither the author nor the audience can ever escape context. But here's the thing. In the age of the internet, where we get 10 different making-of documentaries and a director's tell-all interview before the movie even hits streaming, that comfortable critical distance has become dangerously easy. It's become the default operating system for consuming a text. We substitute our own reading for the creators, not because we found a superior interpretation, but often because we don't want to engage with the uncomfortable, messy, personal reality of the source. We've gotten so good at reading around the author that we've forgotten how to read with them.
Was the sinking of the ship an attempt to foreshadow the forthcoming sinking of the tech market in 2000?
No. Actually, I just wanted to make young girls cry.
And when an author, even an unskilled one, delivers a work that is deeply personal, they're offering the gift of a slice of their life experience. When we reject that in favor of substituting our own reading, we risk negating the value of art altogether. Which brings us to the 2025 supernatural horror film, Weapons. Because this movie, which involves the inexplicable disappearance of a bunch of school children, and is an absolute triumph in narrative misdirection, pushes back. It actively resists the death of the author by digging false rabbit holes for academics who get way too far up their own asses in metaphor and symbolism. What? To treat this film as an impersonal puzzle box is to completely miss the point, and to devalue the art. Because the mystery isn't just the monster in the movie, the mystery is why Cregger made the movie in the first place. And as the film's production context makes painfully clear, the true horror of Weapons is rooted in the author's explicit stated experience with catastrophic grief and familial addiction. This is the tension that we need to explore. When an author's trauma isn't just background, but the entire ethical and communicative core of the text. This is a case where the author refuses to go gentle into that good night. This video contains spoilers, so consider watching the film first before you continue. And if you like what you see, click the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure to click the little bell to be notified for new videos. Okay, so let's stop talking theory and look at what happens when you decide to take the corporeal author, the living, breathing, trauma-having guy, at his word. In 2022, Zach Cregger, who you might know as the plot twist guy from The Whitest Kids You Know, released Barbarian. It was a massive hit, probably because it felt like 3 different movies stitched together in a trench coat. So when Weapons was announced for 2025, the hype train left the station at Mach 10. The premise is pure Brothers Grimm nightmare fuel. We are in the small town of Maybrook, Pennsylvania. At exactly 2:17 a.m., 17 elementary school children wake up, walk out of their houses, and vanish into the woods. No ransom notes, no bodies. They're just gone. From there, the movie fractures. We get this sprawling, multi-perspective narrative that feels like Paul Thomas Anderson's Magnolia if it was directed by John Carpenter. You've got Josh Brolin doing his best repressed masculine rage as Archer, the grieving father hunting for answers. You've got Julia Garner as Justine, a teacher who gets ostracized by the town because people need a scapegoat. And you've got Alden Ehrenreich as a cop who is, well, let's just say he's really bad at his job, and that's a polite way of putting it. For the first hour, it plays like a gritty, realistic mystery. Think Prisoners or Zodiac. But then the third act happens, and the internet kinda hated it. Because it turns out there's no kidnapping ring, there's no government conspiracy. The villain is Gladys. She's an old woman. Specifically, she's a witch, who uses blood magic and her hair dolls to siphon the youth from children to keep herself alive. Critics called the movie disjointed. They called the ending messy. They felt like the movie set up a serious question about violence and answered it with hocus pocus. And if you look at this movie through a purely textual lens, if you kill the author, you're absolutely right to be confused. There's no answer for an incorporeal floating AR-15. There's no internal exegesis for Y217, which, to be fair, was a number that the internet decided was important and then got mad at because there was no explanation.
You can definitely tell there is a new play caller in town. The offense is looking, the offense is looking a lot more versatile. They're getting.
If we use the linear model of communication, where a film is just a message transmitted to a receiver, the message here seems to be, we are failing to protect our children from violence. The monster is gun culture, or COVID, or the failure of institutions. But this reading hits a brick wall the second Gladys shows up. This is where Death of the Author fails us. It allows us, maybe even encourages us, to look for a social reading. Something about capitalism or politics. Because that's what we've trained ourselves to do. We want the monster to be a metaphor for society. But in Weapons, the monster isn't society. The monster is something much more personal. Weapons would be a great film about the chaos of communal tragedy. That's why so many people want to do a COVID reading, or a reading about the epidemic of American school shootings. But we're not doing that. Because killing the author, like killing anything, should be approached with an appropriate amount of thoughtfulness. So yeah, a lot has been made about the floating gun, but the more important thing is we have to talk about the people looking at the gun. Because Weapons isn't just about a witch, is it? Gladys didn't make Justine a high-functioning alcoholic, or Paul an alcoholic with impulse control issues, or Archer an emotionally constipated loner who feels the need to be in control at all times. Those are pre-existing conditions that Gladys just exposed.
Come on.
Justine.
Please.
No.
Okay, be honest. You hated Justine. It's okay, you're supposed to. But we need to interrogate why we hate her. Is it because she's a flawed protagonist? Or is it because she represents something we find fundamentally repulsive? A woman who is bad at nurturing. Society has a very specific script for a grieving woman. You're allowed to be sad, but you have to be sad in a way that is noble and photogenic. Justine is neither. She's messy. She's emotionally decomposing in front of us, and doing it destructively. When the town turns on her, it feels like a witch hunt, because it is. But they aren't hunting her because she's a witch. They're hunting her because she is a mirror. She's the visible evidence of the community's failure. By casting her out, by treating her as the monster, the other parents get to maintain the illusion that they are good. As if the children didn't just walk out of their homes. Justine tries to save Alex, sure. But she's an unreliable savior because she's fighting the same monster he is. The silence of addiction. She recognizes the newspaper on his windows because she knows exactly what it's like to want to hide from the world. There is a version of this movie where Archer Graff is the hero. He's the grieving father, the man of action, the guy who takes matters into his own hands. In a Liam Neeson movie, this behavior gets you a franchise. In Weapons, it gets you a hallucination of a 50-foot rifle hovering over the suburbs. This is Cregger taking the paranoid male archetype and inflating it until it bursts.
Give me back my son!
Archer is the embodiment of a very specific type of toxic grief.
Archer represents the everyman, the current everyman, somebody who lives in resentment.
Instead of processing the loss of his son, which is passive and emotional and feminine, he chooses rage.
So whether he's right or he's wrong, however he deals with any situation is usually the worst way. This 50-year-old adolescent little bitch.
He terrorizes Justine because he needs a target. He needs a bad guy to shoot. Because if there's a bad guy, then there's a solution. But the tragedy of Archer is that his enemy isn't flesh and blood. You can't shoot grief. You can't arrest cancer. You can't perform a tactical reload on the void. If Archer is rage, Paul is denial. Paul is the cop. He is the law. He is the guy who is supposed to restore order. But Paul is also a cheater, a liar.
Does Donna know you're here?
We're not happening right now.
5 minutes later.
He said you weren't together! Liar!
And a man who has built his entire life on the premise that if you just ignore the bad stuff, it doesn't exist. So naturally, the movie peels his face off.
What's all this then?
Paul loses his face because, thematically speaking, he never really had one. He was a mask. He was the nice guy, the good cop, the family man. But it was all performance. When Justine peels that layer away, she exposes the raw meat underneath. It is a moment of extreme body horror, yes. But it's also weirdly the most honest moment Paul has in the entire film. He is finally exposed. He is finally vulnerable. The normative order he tried to protect was rot all along. And now, he's just empty. In the first half hour, you would think that the film is setting up Justine to be the final girl. But where the final girl is virtuous and observant and doesn't drink and doesn't have sex, and survives because she is morally superior to everyone else, Justine descends down a Boston City Hall Plaza slide of bad decisions, ultimately becoming indistinguishable from a predator herself. Alex is the final boy. It's ultimately his action that vanquishes the monster. In the first 2/3 of the film, Alex's weirdness, his silence, his awkwardness, is the thing that makes Justine suspect that he's the monster. But here his difference is purely a product of his environment. In a dysfunctional environment, the black sheep is usually the healthiest person. The most obvious symbol for this is the windows, the newspaper taped over every single pane of glass in the Lilly household. Yes, this is the set design doing the heavy lifting for a spooky atmosphere, but this is also the universal architectural signifier for mind your own business. It's the physical manifestation of a family secret. In the sociology of addiction, the home becomes a fortress. You tape up the windows not to keep the monsters out, but to keep the neighbors from seeing the monsters that are already inside, and they're sitting on the couch. When Alex's parents get frozen by the witch Gladys, they don't turn into zombies. They don't try to eat him. They just stop. They become catatonic. And if you have ever tried to get the attention of a parent who is deep in the throes of substance abuse, or even just a parent who is emotionally checked out, that frozenness, it's way harder than any jump scare. The horror of Alex's life isn't a witch that is hunting him. It's that he is totally, completely alone in a house full of people. He is othered by the town not because he's evil, but because he carries the contagion of trauma. He's the kid you don't let your kids play with because the house smells funny. And that, frankly, is bleaker than anything the Baba Yaga ever did. All 4 of these characters, Justine, Archer, Paul, and Alex, are haunted. But they aren't haunted by Gladys. They are haunted by the desperate, clawing need to be normal in a world that is fundamentally broken. It is a world where we gorge ourselves on joy so much that it poisons us. It's a world where you go to sleep happy and awaken to a text telling you you'll never see your best friend again. It's Zach Cregger's world. Cregger, the director, made it very clear that this film is actually a twofold allegory. It's a story of grief wrapped in a story of addiction. It's a turducken of trauma, essentially. The first monster of the film is catastrophic grief. Cregger has been open about the fact that the script exploded out of him following the sudden tragic death of his best friend and Whitest Kids You Know collaborator Trevor Moore in 2021. This isn't just a bit of trivia for IMDb. This trauma informs the central event of the film, the vanishing children. It positions the supernatural event not as a spooky mystery, but as an allegory for the missing future that occurs when a life is abruptly excised. The kind of sudden, gaping hole left by an unthinkable loss. The movie's premise becomes the narrative manifestation of a community trying to process an absence that makes no rational sense. It's the sheer emotional weight of 17 empty chairs. That's a classic horror metaphor, sure, but Cregger layers it. The second monster, the one that makes the supernatural elements really tick, is the horror of childhood familial addiction. Cregger has said that the film is rooted in his experience as an adult child of an alcoholic, growing up with a father who eventually died of cirrhosis. And once you know that, the movie isn't just scarier, it's sharper. The villain, Aunt Gladys, isn't just a witch anymore. She's the narrative equivalent of addiction itself. The parents in the film exhibit symptoms like slurred speech, glassy-eyed stillness, and organ failure. A standard critic sees demonic possession, but a critic listening to the author sees a horrifyingly accurate portrayal of Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, an alcoholic dementia. The hero, Alex, having to kill the addiction to save the parents? That's not just a boss fight. That's the psychological labor of the ACOA child, only externalized into violence so the consumer can understand it. So the case is closed, right? The author is alive, the meaning is clear, and we all go home sad but enlightened. Well, not quite. Because here's where the author himself tries to sabotage us. In a classic move of, please don't perceive me, Zach Cregger has publicly tried to undermine this whole meaning thing. He told Polygon that he relies on a David Lynch process of transcendental meditation, where he just lets his subconscious vomit up images and leaves them alone. But remember what I said at the opening. Neither the author nor the audience can escape context. Cregger even points to one specific bizarre image in the film, an assault rifle floating in the night sky, and explicitly says, "The fact that I don't understand it is what makes it so important to me." He insists that if he has to explain the meaning, he has failed as a filmmaker. This is the calculated retreat. It's the artist saying, "Hey, I'm just a vessel for the spooky vibes, bro." It's the artist's equivalent of, "The customer is always right. You don't want to alienate potential viewers who are afraid they won't be able to connect with the intended meaning." But we don't have to buy that. Even if Cregger claims he's just being careless and fun, like in his sketch comedy days,
Listen to the woman, John!
the text disagrees. The ACOA allegory is too structural. The medical accuracy of the patient's decline is too precise. And the emotional weight is just too heavy to be accidental. He might want to hide behind the woo-woo mystery, but the affective labor, the work of processing that trauma, is right there on the screen. Cregger's patron saint of horror thematics, Stephen King, once witnessed a friend get run over by a train. King says he returned home with no memory of the event. And early in his career, he denied that it influenced his writing, but come on, son. A trauma like that can't help but be a canon event in your life. And an author is a collection of their experiences. A person has wants, dreams, and fears, and occasionally, they put those to print on paper or celluloid. And other people recognize themselves in those wants, dreams, and fears. That's art. And it's the reason why a baby can't write the Iliad.
Addition, baby!
When we ignore the author's pain to focus on cool lore or fan theories, we are consuming the trauma while refusing to pay the ethical price tag. We are ignoring the cultural worker who turned his grief into a tool for civic imagination. So do we let the author die? No. We keep him alive, even if he's the one trying to ghost us. Because realizing that horror on screen comes from a real human wound isn't just additional content. It's the only way to watch a movie with your eyes actually open. Stay warm, stay safe, wash your hands, return your shopping carts, make your choices, and I'll see you next time.